Good evening, good morning for some of you, good afternoons for the others. Welcome to the third Global Leadership Masterclass curated by the Open Diplomacy Institute in 2022 with the support of the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Canadian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and NG. We are very happy to host you today to discuss another topic we wanted to address this year, which is the infrastructure geopolitics. And therefore, we will have the great pleasure to have a round of discussion with Dr. Mihai Precup, who is Romania's Secretary of State for Finance, and many other prominent guests, which I will introduce in the course of our discussion, from Kenya, from Japan, from Italy, and from the US. This masterclass is meant for us to draw lessons from what leadership means in facing complex issues, just like we did in addressing digital disruptions next week. That's the other topics we had already was to close the gender gap. And this topic today is meant to address a very sensitive aspect of international relations, which is infrastructure building as ties last. And we all have heard about the competition between global powers in building infrastructure, China's Belt and Road Initiative, the European Union Global Gateway response, as well as the prior to that US initiative around the Washington Consensus. And to address this issue, I'm very happy to bring into the conversation Dr. Mihai Precup, who is today the Secretary of State for Finance in Romania. We'll have a quarter of discussion, and after that, we will have a wider public policy discussion with the rest of our panelists. And I encourage you to use the chat in asking questions so that we can incorporate your queries into the debate before we get to the Q&A session at the end of this masterclass. Welcome to Dr. Mihai Precup, that I'm happy to introduce to you today. Hi, Mihai. I hope you can,
yes,
it's
I
all
can
right.
hear you very well. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Always a pleasure to be around open diplomacy. It is a great pleasure for me to send some messages, let's say, from the Romanian government on this very important topic, developing infrastructure in these difficult times, particularly Romania, due to the geographical position. It's a little bit, it's near the war, so the war is at our border. Very challenging for us. It makes us believe that now is the moment more than ever to develop infrastructure. For us, the war was, and these difficult moments provided also good opportunities, even that we face.
And in stating so, you clearly outline why we wanted to have you from Romania to talk about this topic. Let me ask you this first question about your role in the Ministry of Finance of Romania. You, as a Secretary of State for Finance, you are in charge specifically of relationships with the international financial institutions. And this is key to accelerate the development of the infrastructures of your country. And I would like to know which international organizations you work with and why, and how it can help to boost Romania's development, what type of infrastructures you aim at developing with this type of cooperation, and why it could be critical for your country's path.
Yes, thank you very much. Very interesting question. So first of all, I said that even though we have a war at our border, there are huge opportunities in developing infrastructure. Now the request from the companies to host, for instance, in Constanța port, it's more than never. I mean, we need to develop all this infrastructure, and we see that also inflation is due to the lack of investments all over Europe. And we are looking to develop also transport infrastructure as well as energy infrastructure in order to be more independent from Russian imports. Anyway, Romania, I think, is one of the most independent countries in terms of imports of raw materials from Russia in Europe and for sure in Eastern Europe. In my responsibilities, I have the relation with the IFIs, international financial institutions. Myself, I used to work for one of them, for the European Investment Bank, for a couple of years. I'm in charge with all the European, EBRD, EIB, and also IMF and the World Bank, all the IFIs which are in contact with Romania. I think we are now developing a strategy with them to set up PPPs, public partnerships, public-private partnerships in order to develop infrastructure. Romania is very active also in the relation with EIB, which is one of the world's biggest financiers in terms of infrastructure. And we are benefiting from them as well as financing, but also technical assistance in setting up projects and in developing projects. Another responsibility in my portfolio is the management of state participation in the financial institutions. We have in Romania 2 banks which are systemic banks for Romania, which are owned by the state, and they are under the management of my office. Also guarantee funds, and we are very much working now to develop to set up a Romanian development bank. You have in France BPI France, you have KfW in Germany, and we are looking to learn from their expertise and develop a national, set up a national development bank. We really believe that the partnership with the financial institution is key, but you need a local footprint in order to identify strategic projects for the country and channel the funds from the IFIs towards the specific projects in Romania. We believe that the IFIs can provide long-term financing cheaper than the Romanian state can find now on the financial markets, less volatile the cost of the financing, as well as long-term financing, which is rarely the case on the financial markets. And on top of this, the financial institutions can provide technical assistance, very important in preparing the projects, because we live in a world in Europe as well as in Romania where the liquidity is abundant. You benefit of a lot of liquidity, but the challenge is to prepare sound project in order to be bankable and to be very interesting for the financial institutions as well as for the private sector.
Yeah, we will definitely zoom on this PPP approach that you touched upon, and also about I'm about to ask you a question about this idea of a national development bank, but I'm just outlining how much important it is for you to have access to cheaper long-term financing and also technical expertise in working with international financial institutions, which are at the regional and global level. But as you just said, your development strategy also relies on investments in infrastructures, which could be channeled through a national development bank for Romania. What we usually have when we hear development bank is foreign aid, and in France it echoes more Agence Française de Développement than BPI, the Banque Publique d'Investissement, Bank for Public Investments. But we clearly got the idea that it's a public investment bank that you're working on. Why is it so critical to have a tool like this to sustain your strategy of investment and to boost your growth with high standard and resilient infrastructure that you need to meet your targets?
First of all, as you very well know, the infrastructure projects are long-term projects. It takes a time to set up, it takes a time to implement, and it's a very long time to operate this type of projects. A national development bank would play a very important role in terms of stability. As you know, in any European countries, you'll always have a certain volatility in terms of politics, in terms of prime ministers, in terms of ministers. The role of a development bank is to have a more steady approach and better prioritize the project and have a long-term follow-up on the infrastructure projects. This is the first point. Second point, a national development bank will always, we believe that will always know better the realities at the local level than an IFI, international financial institution. Thirdly, as we said, there are a lot of liquidities on the market. The main challenge is to manage to channel all this liquidity from the IFIs towards the Romanian economy. And better is if this money is channeled towards the specific project. So the role of the National Development Bank is to negotiate long-term financing, cheaper financing with the financial institutions, and to channel all this financing toward the specific projects. On the top of this, I also believe that it will be a center of technical expertise. For me, the main challenge in setting up a national development bank is not the funds, the liquidity, the money. The most challenging part is in recruiting competent people, serious people with experience in promoting development projects or projects for development. Last point, I think a national development bank would have also the role for Romania in consolidating and gathering different instruments which are currently part of them at the Ministry of Finance, others at the Ministry of Economy, others at the Ministry of Transport. The idea is to gather all the instruments which are doing today development in Romania under the same umbrella, which will provide more clarity and will provide more credentials to the Romanian state when we'll negotiate with the financial institutions.
Thank you so much. That's very clear, and it's part of the lessons we drove from those masterclasses on what leadership means. That we usually come back to the point where it's about clarity and bringing consistency and coherence around a complex issue, and that's again one of the key lessons we can draw from what you just said. The third question I wanted to ask you is the fact that surprisingly enough, Romania is one of the most independent countries among the EU from Russian gas, and that's not the result of the geography or anything. It's because you've built your infrastructure in a way that made it possible for you to be as independent as this. To what extent your development strategy also serves your sovereignty objectives? When I hear you about the development of such a national development bank and the operations you run with IFIs, you also said you wanted to develop a PPP approach, a public-private partnership approach. How much does it serve your sovereignty objectives, and how much does it make sure that Romania keeps as independent as it is now?
I think this crisis, we faced a couple of crises. We faced sanitary crisis, we faced the war, we faced which is the security crisis, we faced the inflation, we faced at the worldwide level, right? Not only in Romania. I will explain you more what I want to say. Probably now than any time, putting the national interest above everything is more than ever important, and also to promote, let's say, a more patriotic approach in terms of investments. We see that the inflation in Romania, for instance, is not due to the Romanian factors, but is more imported than generated in Romania. What I say by that, we see that the inflation is due by the disruption in the